Hiker dies after being hit by lightning in Ma On Shan. And in Mexico, a landslide victory for left-wing candidate in the presidential election.
Good evening. What was meant to be a fun hike turned deadly for a teenager today. It's expected that he got struck by lightning near Nongping in Ma On Shan. Winna Wong reports.
Rescuers tried to keep the 18-year-old alive as he was airlifted from Ma On Shan Country Park and rushed to hospital. But after about half an hour of rescue, he was declared dead. At around 11 o'clock this morning, the teenager had set off for a hike with 5 others in Sai Kung. About an hour later, the group reached an area near Pyramid Hill on a section of the Maclehose Trail in Ma On Shan. That's when they heard a loud strike of thunder, and everyone knelt low onto the ground. But as they got up, the teenager's friends found him unresponsive. The legs of his trousers had also split open, and there were burn marks on the rims of his glasses. The government flying service sent out a helicopter, which dropped medical staff onto the ground before taking the man away to hospital. Another hiker we spoke to told us the weather in that area changed drastically within a short period of time.
When we started our hike around 8 a.m., it was sunny and the weather was all great. But then we really didn't expect such a great downpour. From drizzling to heavy downpour, it just took maybe an hour or half an hour. The change came so sudden. Along the steps, it's not just puddles we're talking about, it's more like a little waterfall. So we're all soaked wet, and the thunder was really terrifying.
A hiking expert we spoke to said it's important that people don't underestimate the power and instability of thunderstorms.
I think the best way in the morning and before you hike, listen to the meteo. Well, I think the best way is go down as soon as possible and try to avoid them. Maybe find some protection, the big tree or maybe a stone or something like that to try to protect yourself.
The observatory issued a thunderstorm warning at 10:48 this morning. Authorities say from noon to 1 p.m. alone, over 1,000 strikes of lightning were observed, about half of which occurred in New Territories East. Winna Wong, TVB News.
Secretary for Transport and Housing Frank Chang sees land reclamation as an effective way to cope with population growth and rising housing demands. He also supports a government restructuring to split his bureau into 2 different departments. Kana Chu explains.
Just yesterday, the chief executive suggested the restructuring of her administration as there may be too much on Frank Chan's plate. The transport and housing chief is in favor of splitting his bureau into 2 so he can focus more on housing.
The portfolio of the Transport and Housing Bureau is indeed quite wide, and things are happening every day and now and then. There is an advantage to split into 2. But in terms of policy formulation and implementation, it's important that we do have time to review and to think what we are going to go ahead.
While there's no timetable for the restructuring, he does have ideas on how to address Hong Kong's housing problems. He agrees that land reclamation for a plot larger than Shantin is the way to go. Although the official stressed he respects public opinions, his comment came as the task force on land supply is still holding a public consultation, which won't end until mid-September. If there are indeed land reclamation projects, efforts must be made to avoid sensitive ecosystems, said Secretary for the Environment Wang Kam Singh. For now, those looking to own a flat may have to pin their hopes on less expensive units under the home ownership scheme. That's after a government plan to adjust the pricing mechanism for subsidized housing and delink it from private market rates. Tina Chu, TVB News.
At least 48 people are dead after an overcrowded bus spun off a road and plunged into a deep ravine in northern India. Police say 45 people were killed instantly and 3 others died after being rushed to hospital. 12 others remain in hospital, some in critical condition. Police say the 28-seater bus was carrying 59 passengers plus the driver. They say poor weather and road conditions may have been factors in the crash.
Now to the presidential election in Mexico, where a left-wing candidate scored a landslide victory. The results prove Mexicans were seeking a profound change in politics.
¡Viva México! ¡Viva México!
They say 3 times a charm, and that's exactly how many times Andrés Manuel López Obrador had to run for president of Mexico before he won. The left-wing populist politician held his victory as a historic day. Indeed it was, according to Mexico's electoral authorities, which confirm López Obrador won more than half the votes, a remarkable mandate not seen in the country for years.
Hace unos minutos que hablé con él.
Conservative Ricardo Anaya conceded defeat when it was clear, even though he was in second place, he was trailing way behind with 22% of the vote. In third was Jose Antonio Meade of the ruling Institutional Revolution Party. He garnered only 17% of the vote. In a national address, outgoing President Enrique Peña Nieto hailed the outcome as a sign of democracy in the country.
Juntos haremos historia. Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
Peña Nieto leaves office in December, tarnished by corruption allegations and security concerns. The popularity of López Obrador marks the beginning of change in Mexico's political landscape. Furious over incessant corruption and violence, Mexican voters elected the 64-year-old leftist firebrand. He vowed to transform Mexico and oust the mafia of power ruling the country. Mexicans hope he will honor his promise to lower the salaries of the rich and raise those of the poor. There were reports of election violence and fraud. Bullet holes marked the walls where 5 members of López Obrador's party were shot to death in the southern state of Oaxaca. Elsewhere in Oaxaca, voting was suspended after 2 voting stations were set on fire. Angry residents demanded to vote at one polling station in Mexico City that claimed it ran out of ballots.
German Interior Minister Horst Seehofer has threatened to resign in protest over Chancellor Angela Merkel's endorsement of the EU's deal to tackle immigration into Europe. The two are due to hold crisis talks later today, but the Interior Minister is convinced that the Chancellor should have negotiated a tougher plan on migration. The European Union's ability to handle the stream of migrants is causing rifts among member states and has triggered a political crisis in the EU's most dominant country. German Interior Minister Horst Seehofer offered his resignation to party colleagues late on Sunday, escalating a row over migration with Chancellor Angela Merkel that threatens her fragile government. The dispute has raised serious questions over the future of Germany's less than 4-month-old government. It pits Seehofer and his Bavaria-only Christian Social Union, or CSU, against Merkel, the head of its longtime sister party, the Christian Democratic Union. With an eye on the Bavarian state elections in October, the CSU is determined to show that it is tough on migration. Seehofer wants to turn away asylum seekers who have already been registered in other EU countries back at Germany's border. But Merkel is adamant that Germany shouldn't take drastic action yet. The Interior Minister is also unhappy with the agreements reached last week at an EU leaders' summit, saying the 3-point plan is not robust enough to tackle the migration issue. Merkel maintains the plan will accomplish what Seehofer seeks. But the CSU, which has sparred with Merkel over migrant policy since 2015, believes its credibility is at stake as it tries to curb support for the anti-immigrant far-right Alternative for Germany in the Bavaria election. Today, Christian Democratic Union leaders and lawmakers were in damage control mode, stressing the importance of maintaining the alliance with the CSU, Germany's strongest political force for much of its post-war history.
And still ahead in our newscast, a human rights lawyer speaks out on her subversion confession. A survey on job hunting difficulties faced by ethnic minorities.
呢個辦公室個個做事都好認真，呢幾位同事嘅無影手快到咩都幫你搞得掂，咁先可以1分鐘幫你批核貸款。仲有佢哋唔喐唔笑唔怕騷擾，堅持要等，因為要俾你30篇服務承諾，有時仲會不停咁跑，就係俾你睇清睇楚，絕冇隱藏條款，仲冇手續費添。匯豐分期萬應前夠晒專業幫你搞掂。
Welcome back to TVB News. Disturbing details tonight from a human rights lawyer in Beijing who opened up about her ordeal. Wang Yu was one of many taken away and locked up during a large-scale crackdown on activists back in 2015. 3 years on, what has changed? Elmi Lung reports.
Remember Wang Yu? The Beijing-based lawyer has defended practitioners of Falun Gong, a group banned on the mainland. She was one of the first human rights lawyers and activists rounded up in 2015. Their arrests and subsequent detention, which started on July 9th, became known as the 709 crackdown.
大概也是3点钟左右的样子吧。
Wang remembered sounds of drilling at around 3 in the morning before a gang charged in. She was then handcuffed and dragged downstairs into a car. She was later charged with subverting state power, which she eventually confessed on camera, claiming foreign organizations interfered in mainland affairs.
把我绑到那个，它是一个铁椅子。
I was tied to a metal stool, and for 5 days I was not allowed to close my eyes. When I did so, they smacked the chair or the desk, and I was not allowed out, she recalls. It wasn't just her freedom that was at stake back then, but also that of her son.
在国外，
An overseas group wanted to present me with a human rights award. I was told my son would never get to leave the country if I accepted the prize, Wang says. Her son only managed to leave China early this year to study in Australia. But the passports of Wang and her husband are still being withheld by the authorities. Even with no word on when she'll get her license back, the 47-year-old, now released on bail, hasn't lost hope that she'll one day return to the legal profession.
一个国家如果要是
She said the rule of law is what a country needs in order to advance. Elmi Long, TVB News.
The mother charged with killing and disposing her newborn baby was said to have been mentally unstable after giving birth. That's what the court heard during a mention hearing today. Chan Win-Ki was taken to Tuen Mun Magistracy this morning. The 28-year-old is suspected to have placed the baby girl in a plastic bag and left it at a refuse collection point in Tuen Mun last Friday. Her 43-year-old boyfriend is charged with concealing birth of child. The couple have 3 other children. Police will need more time to go through the autopsy report and compare the infant's DNA with the female defendant. The case has been adjourned until August 27th.
A life annuity may be the way forward for retirees to boost their monthly income, but an academic says one should not rely on it to fight rising living costs. Details now with Elmi Long.
This 84-year-old lives by herself. After paying water and electricity bills from her $2,600 old age living allowance, she's left with around $1,000 a month, even less after paying several $100s in medical fees. There's a way to boost her income though. That's if she signs up for the government's brand new life annuity scheme. Assuming she's willing to spend $160,000 of her savings, the 6.4% annuity rate should generate $850 a month. As long as her remaining assets do not exceed the limit to qualify for the higher old age living allowance, the old lady could receive more than $4,300 a month from the government subsidy and annuity payment combined. Don't assume that's enough to fight inflation though.
頭頭
Simon Lee, a senior lecturer at the School of Accountancy at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, says annuity payouts are not linked to inflation, so retirees should look at other investment opportunities with higher returns. He also suggested that if health permits, senior citizens could consider working part-time to boost their income. Elmi Long, TVB News.
As graduates begin to look for job opportunities, a survey shows that it's difficult for ethnic minorities to get a job, even if they have high academic achievements. Pinky Wong tells us why.
Where do you usually find jobs? The Labor Department? Not for him, as he didn't find it helpful.
Thus, Labor Department don't mention for me to speak Chinese, to write Chinese. Then I go, then he said no. This is a Hong Kong government responsibility to give us a job and then try to connect with these ethnic minorities.
In the past 6 months, together with an associate professor from Leinnan University, the Diocesan Pastoral Center for Workers of the Catholic Diocese of Hong Kong surveyed around 170 ethnic minority youths on their job hunting experiences. They described the unemployment rate among ethnic minority students who hold secondary school education diplomas and college degrees as disastrous, as 2/3 of them are without jobs. Graduates say they get rejected most when they go to interviews for white-collar jobs, as employers prefer Chinese speakers. By comparison, there is a lower unemployment rate of less than 20% among job seekers with lower education levels. And where do they work? Mostly in the construction industry. The interviewees hope to get more induction training and internship opportunities so they can break the vicious circle of being labeled inexperienced and rejected for a job. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
And from all of us, thanks for joining.